Edward is a small coastal freighter, and he is also the oldest boat in the harbor. When he was new, Edward traveled to the islands of the north to deliver mail and cargo to communities. Now, Edward makes just one delivery a year, but the delivery is of letters from children to Santa at the North Pole. Edward is the Christmas ship. Finally, the letters to Santa arrived at the dock. Edward's friends, Tonya the tugboat and Clarence the submarine, came by to celebrate the arrival of the mail bags. Workers started the process of putting Christmas lights on Edward so that every ship he passed would know he is the Christmas ship. The next day, Clarence left for the North Pole. As he pulled away from the dock, Tonya the tugboat blew her horn to let everybody in the harbor know that the Christmas ship was underway. Clarence the submarine watched as Edward left. Clarence wished he had such an important delivery as to travel to Santa's workshop. Edward blew his horn as he passed the lighthouse. Clarence watched Edward leave the harbor through his periscope. He felt sad to see Edward leave because Edward was Clarence's best friend, but he knew that he must deliver the letters to Santa. Santa needed to know what the children had wished for and the presents they had hoped to receive. The sea was calm and the moon was full and shining over the water. As Edward headed north, his old friend Sienna, the sea turtle, joined him. Sienna was one of the oldest turtles in the sea, and she had been traveling with Edward since he was new. Sienna was very wise about the mysteries of the ocean and the ships which sailed across it. A few days after leaving the harbor, Edward was excited to see the first signs of the Arctic. Ice floes appeared on the horizon, and he could see the northern lights, which scientists called the Aurora borealis. The northern lights appeared in the sky over the northern horizon on clear nights as green, purple, and yellow ribbons. As Edward sailed towards the North Pole, the passages became narrower and covered with snow and ice, making it difficult for Edward to see where he was going. As Edward came around an icy bend, he saw a giant whirlpool directly ahead. Despite his best efforts, Edward couldn't stop or steer around the whirlpool. Even though Edward's engines were powerful, they weren't strong enough to free him from the pull of the swirling water. As he was dragged into the center, the pull was stronger. Edward spun around and around until he was dizzy. Edward's stern was soon being dragged underwater. Edward blew his horn in distress, hoping for help. Edward was terrified as he was pulled down. All of a sudden, Edward could hear a loud voice calling to him, "Take this cable, and I will pull you free of the whirlpool." The voice came from Riley, the rescue tugboat. Edward could see Riley's bright orange hull just beyond the whirlpool. Edward fastened the cable to his deck, and Riley's powerful motors roared. Riley was one of the most powerful ocean-going tugboats in the world. Riley had two enormous engines which he used to save sinking ships and for towing them to safety. With a cable attached to Edward's bow, Edward's motors strained against the pull of the water, and Riley pulled with all of his might. Suddenly, Edward could feel himself free and moving. Edward was thankful that Riley had been so close when he became trapped in the whirlpool. Edward explained that he was traveling to the North Pole to deliver letters from children to Santa. When Riley heard this, he asked if he could travel with Edward to the North Pole to help. Edward once again set out to find the magic passage to Santa's workshop. The winter had come early this year, and ice was everywhere. Upon rounding a bend, they saw Luna, the icebreaker, pushing against an ice wall and looking sad. She said the ice was too thick for Edward to travel through the magic passage. Edward was sad. The letters must get through, he thought. Sienna said she had heard from mermaids about a secret underwater passage leading to Santa's workshop, but she couldn't take the letters because she needed to breathe air. All of a sudden there was a loud splash. It was Clarence, the submarine. He had secretly followed Edward. Clarence had an idea. Being a submarine, he could travel underwater through the secret passage to Santa's workshop to deliver the letters. Edward agreed and loaded the mail bags with the letters into Clarence. Clarence then dove under the water. Now all he had to do was to find the hidden passage under the ice. As he went deeper and further under the ice, it was soon almost completely black, except for the light cast from the headlight on the front of the submarine. Clarence was afraid, but he kept going. He knew how important it was that a way was found to Santa's workshop to deliver the letters. In the dark, he could see eyes watching him. Suddenly, as Clarence entered a dark ice cave, he felt a swish of water. An enormous shark had been lurking in the cave, and it lunged out as Clarence went by, thinking Clarence was a big fish. Clarence's motors were on full, and his propeller pushed him forward. Just as fast as he could go, Clarence made it past the shark safely, but in doing so, lost his way. Clarence was truly lost now. The ocean around him was almost completely black. He turned his powerful headlight on and motored forward. Then, out of the black, Clarence saw the glow of lights. He thought he was imagining things because it looked like a Christmas tree was swimming in front of him. Then he saw it again and decided to follow the lights. As Clarence caught up with the lights, he couldn't believe his eyes. Clarence saw the light had come from a beautiful glowing seahorse. The seahorse stopped and looked eye to eye with Clarence. The seahorse told Clarence that her name was Aurora, that she had been named Aurora because the scales on her back glowed like the northern lights. Clarence exclaimed to Aurora that he was lost and that he had an important delivery for Santa. Much to Clarence's delight, Aurora knew just how to get to the secret passage to Santa's workshop and said that she would lead Clarence through the ice caves to Santa. Clarence was happy. Soon, Aurora and Clarence arrived at a large hole in the ice outside of Santa's house. With Aurora waiting behind, Clarence inched through the ice to find Santa's workshop on the other side. Soon, Santa himself was next to Clarence getting the letters. Santa wondered what had happened to Edward as he had been expecting him. Clarence explained. Santa was grateful for Clarence's surprise visit and Aurora's assistance. After Santa had taken the letters, Clarence took a last look at the beauty of Santa's workshop and the North Pole. It was time for Clarence to get back to Edward, Riley, Luna, and Sienna, as he knew they would be worried about him because he had to travel under the ice for such a long distance. Clarence was glad he could help his friend, Edward, and the children. Clarence pointed his nose down into the water and dove through the hole in the ice where he had found Aurora waiting for him. Clarence told Aurora all about the excitement of meeting Santa. Aurora enjoyed the story and said she would help Clarence to find his way back to his friends who would be waiting. Aurora and Clarence were now friends. Once again, suddenly, Clarence could feel the swish of water as the shark lunged out of his hiding place. Aurora quickly darted to Clarence's other side for protection. Clarence could feel the shark bounce off of his metal hull, and he shook from the impact of the shark's attack. Fortunately, Clarence's hull had shielded Aurora from the shark, too. Once, back in the icy bay, Clarence prepared to surface next to Edward and his friends. He had hoped that Aurora could follow him back to the harbor. She explained that she had to stay with her family under the ice, but hoped that Clarence would come back soon to visit. Clarence was sad and said goodbye. Clarence's friends were happy to see him. Clarence, Edward, Riley, and Sienna thanked Luna and headed home. Luna stayed to do her important job of breaking ice. Soon Clarence and his friends were back in the harbor with Tonya just in time to celebrate Christmas together. The boats in the harbor were thankful to have Christmas together and that the Christmas boats had come home safely.